My name is Rain Paul, and this is for Children's Literature ENG353. This is my Week 8 assignment for Historical Nonfiction Children's Literature. For my children's literature story study, I chose to do stories from World War II and Holocaust. I think that this is an important time in history because it shows the incredible dark and devastating time and how heroes emerged from it. These stories teach lessons about equality, discrimination, courage, and what it takes to really be a true hero. I think that these are really good stories for children to read because all five stories I chose, their main characters are children between the ages of 10 and 15. So for children reading these stories, it gives them a real person to look up to and to see how they handled these situations. These stories deal with a very serious subject matter, and they tell stories of everyday heroes, and they give children role models, and the authors all did a very good job of taking serious, dark, and very sad moments and making them relatable for children so that they can learn from them. The stories I selected would be most appropriate for children in grade 5, that would typically be ages 10 to 11. The first story I read was Number the Stars by Lewis Lowry. This is a story about Anne-Marie Johansson and her friend Ellen Rosen. They live in Copenhagen at the beginning of World War II. Ellen comes and hides with the Johansson family once the Nazis have started looking for Jews, and Anne-Marie's family help Ellen and a couple other Jewish families escape from Denmark. This story teaches readers about bravery and what friendship means. The relationship between Anne-Marie and Helen shows that no matter what your religious or cultural background, you can still be friends, and that doing the right thing is not always easy, but real heroes come out of these situations. The second story I read is The Diary of a Young Girl, written by Anne Frank. This is one of the most famous books or autobiographies ever written, and it was written by a 13-year-old girl. Um, this story is a more difficult read, and for many grade fivers, maybe a little bit above their head. But I thought that this would still be a very good novel study to do in my lesson because it would allow students to do group and classwork together and work through the story together. A brief summary of the story is the first-hand story of Anne Frank and a group of Jews, 8 other Jews who spent over 2 years hiding. The family lived in a sealed-off annex in an office building, which is now an international tourist attraction. Of the 8 who were hiding, eventually they got caught, and only one, Otto Frank, Anne's father, survived. After Anne's death and after Otto came back, he found Anne's diary, and him and another lady, the lady that was helping them hide, decided to publish her story so that others could read it. This is a great story for children because it shows them how a real child handled a situation. Anne was 13 when this all happened, and so it gives them someone around their age who they can relate to and who went through a situation that most readers today would never even imagine. It gives them a real character to look up to and shows them how it makes them question their own lives, and they look at Anne's life and then they can compare it to their own. The third story I chose was Boy in the Striped Pajamas by John Boyan. Unlike the first 2 stories, this story has a male main character, which I thought would be important if you're doing a historical fiction study of a bunch of different books in a classroom. You couldn't just have female characters, so I picked this book and the next book specifically for their male character leads. The main character in this book is Bruno, a 9-year-old boy growing up in Berlin during World War II. This is an interesting story because Bruno is the son of a high-up SS officer, which gives an interesting point of view to the story. Most Holocaust stories are told from Jewish perspectives. Bruno is the son of a German officer. One day, Bruno meets Shmuel. Sorry, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it. A Jewish boy who is living in Auschwitz, one of the most famous concentration camps during the Holocaust. While the two are drastically different and from different backgrounds, they become very close friends, which shows that no matter where you're from or what you believe, you can be friends with almost anyone. Bruno ends up sneaking into the camp to help his friend find his father, and at the end of the story, it leaves you with the two holding hands in a gas chamber, and it leads readers to believe that the two were gassed. And then in the epilogue, it talks about how Bruno's father realized what had happened to Bruno and was very upset about it. This story is good because it really tells a Holocaust story from an uncommon perspective. It shows friendship and the innocence of children. For Bruno didn't really understand what was happening, and at first he didn't even understand that his friend was in a concentration camp. So it just really shows that friendship doesn't have bounds and what it means to be a true friend, and that your background doesn't matter. The final story that I chose was Friedrich by Hans Peter Richter. The narrator of this story is Friedrich's neighbor, who is a Christian, but Friedrich is a protagonist. He's a young Jewish boy who's growing up in Germany. This story goes over the changes that Friedrich went through as the Jews began losing their rights. It talks about how he got kicked out of school, wasn't allowed to go to the swimming pool, couldn't go out to movies. So it really just shows the rights that was taken away from him. Um, After having his life completely changed, Friedrich was eventually refused shelter during an air raid and was killed from shrapnel. This is a great story for children. While it is incredibly sad and it's really quite an upsetting story to read, it shows discrimination and the horrible influence that it had on people's lives, which really has readers relating to the stories of who they're reading about. I thought this would be a very strong story to have towards the end of this towards the end of the book study, just because it's starting to deal with more serious subject matter. The final story I picked was My Yellow Canary Star by Eva Wiseman. It's my fifth and final story for the study. This story talks about one of the greatest heroes of the past century, Raoul Wallenberg, who was responsible for saving up to 100,000 lives. This story talks about the life of Marta and how her life was forever changed by World War II and the Holocaust. She was a Jew growing up in Budapest, and her family were being sent away to concentration camps, but luckily for Marta and her family, they were numbered among those who were saved by Wallenberg. So this just shows a true hero and the sacrifices and the courage that it took for him to save all those lives. This story shares the incredible bravery of Walberg and teaches readers that heroes come out in times of need and the incredible sacrifice he made to save those. I thought these books all did a great job of showing readers what it was like for Jewish children during World War II and during the Holocaust. All authors do a really good job at portraying the awful events in a way that can be informative and understandable for readers between the ages of 10 and 11. Um, when classes were study these books, they would have a lot of discussion topics such as discrimination, bravery, equality, and how they would handle in these situations. These stories would also help them appreciate the being lives and the freedom and bravery that we have here. These stories are all good because they all give children readers um, characters to look up to and that they can relate to. This would be my novel study and historical fiction study if I was teaching a class.